In Chapter 4, we'll be teaching you the basics of design and typography to help you produce better design work. These best practices and rules will help you understand how elements and visuals come together to create a successful and impactful design. By the end of this chapter, you'll be able to identify the elements that make up design, understand type terminology and concepts, understand color, and utilize the common principles of design. So, let's get started. First, let's look at the elements, which include lines, shapes, texture, color, and typography. Lines might seem like a simplistic tool, but they're crucial for organizing visual information and setting the tone for design. Horizontal lines evoke feelings of stillness and stability. Vertical lines, on the other hand, are energetic. For example, take a look at the Wired website, which uses both horizontal and vertical lines. As a news source for tech, they want to convey themselves as a professional, organized, and trustworthy source. Their use of clean lines helps communicate how they want to be perceived. If you want to create a sense of drama, use diagonal lines like in the example on the right. It's more dynamic and catches your eye. Next, we have shape. When you read shape, you probably think of a square or triangle. Those are geometric shapes. There are also natural, organic shapes, which are irregular and often contain curves. Like lines, each type of shape produces different emotional effects. Geometric shapes suggest structure, control, and order. Organic shapes, on the other hand, are more comforting and friendly. Take a look at our examples here. The Basecamp homepages uses organic, rounded, curvilinear shapes to evoke warmth and friendliness. In contrast, the Squarespace site uses rectangles and straight edges. Next, we have texture. Texture adds depth to design, though you want to be careful when mixing materials. Tossing conflicting textures together like wood and glassy surfaces might turn a physical connection with your art into a more grating sensation. Notice how the Sumbrella website on the left uses the texture of water to create the feeling as if you are there. On the right, the website for the movie Spotlight uses a texture to create a faded and gritty look, which helps convey the mood of the film. Next is color. Color can have a lot of impact on your perception of a design. Think of how recognizable Christmas colors are or the Coca-Cola red is. Colors are often categorized as warm, cool, or neutral. Warm colors are like red or orange, cool is more blue or green, and neutral is often gray or white. Consider what you're trying to evoke in your audience. After all, people decide how they feel about a product within 90 seconds, and researchers have found up to 90% of that judgment is solely based on color. Plus, further studies have found consumers are more likely to buy when a color feels right for the brand. We'll cover color in more detail in a bit. Lastly, we have typography. First, let's clear up the difference between a typeface and a font. Think of each typeface as a family and fonts as individual members of that family. For example, in the Helvetica typeface, or family, fonts, or family members, include Helvetica Roman, Helvetica Extra Condensed, Helvetica Light, etc. We'll cover the type in more detail in a following section. Now, let's take a look at color. The two main color models that we are working with in Photoshop are RGB and CMYK. RGB stands for red, green, and blue. The RGB color model uses these base colors to form just about every other color you can imagine, since red, green, and blue are additive colors. Essentially, this means that the RGB color model creates other colors by combining or adding different quantities of red, green, and blue. It is typically used for the web and some photographic printing. CMYK is the opposing color model to RGB. It stands for cyan, magenta, yellow, and key. Key is simply another name for black. Instead of using additive types of color, it uses subtractive colors. Therefore, the more colors you add together, the darker the colors are going to be. It is used for printing. Let's next take a look at the color wheel and color relationships. We're going to use the Adobe Colors website to show you different color relationships. You can set a base color and get color combinations based on the relationship you want. The middle color here is your base color. Let's click through the first 4 color relationships. Analogous is color located adjacent to each other. You'll see it selected the colors around red, including orange and magenta hues. Next is monochromatic. Notice that the colors are shades or tint variations of red now. Next is triad. Triad are three hues that equally position themselves on the wheel, as you can see here. Lastly, complementary is when two colors are located opposite of each other. In this case, we have red and green as polar opposites. The Adobe Colors website is a great tool to play with and help you understand color relationships. Now let's go in depth on typography and terms you should know. Fonts can be categorized as sans serif or serif fonts. Serif fonts have a flourish around the edges of letters, whereas sans serif do not. Sans literally translates to without. Serif typefaces are typically used in print to increase readability and increase a reader's speed of long passages of text. They help the eye travel across a line, especially if lines are long or have relatively open word spacing. In contrast, sans serif typefaces are typically used in web. When you're working in web and smaller sizes, the clean style of sans serif typefaces read better. Let's discuss key typography terms, starting with tracking. Tracking is the letter spacing between a group of letters in a sentence or paragraph. As you can tell from the examples here, tracking affects the density of the copy and its readability. Loose tracking might be good for a headline that you want to give more emphasis to, but too loose tracking will cause problems with readability. Kerning is the horizontal spacing between two characters. Notice how in the top example, the L and V, as well as the T and I, are closer together than the rest of the letters, versus the bottom, where the horizontal spacing is more equal and therefore has better kerning. Leading is the vertical spacing between lines of text from baseline to baseline. You want to play with leading to find just the right amount to create good readability. And lastly, we have alignment. Text alignment is the setting of text flow relative to a page, column, or cell. These are the four different alignments you'll see: right align, left align, center align, and full justified. Next, we'll cover design principles you should know. Hierarchy is the arrangement or classification of things according to relative importance. In design, hierarchy helps visually show what's the most important and what the viewer should look at first, second, third, and so on. You'll notice when you look at something designed well, it's easy to tell what the graphic is trying to convey, and your eye should immediately jump to an element. In a flyer like the ones here, you want the reader to notice the headline first and then the other elements such as description and date. Size and color contrast are used here to do that. Contrast is the state of being strikingly different from something else. Contrast can be created with color, texture, size, etc. In this example, contrast is depicted with color choice and balance of elements. Notice the color contrast. You have dark red versus light blue. In terms of balance, one side is heavy with graphic elements to depict distraction, while on the other side, it is empty of elements and depicts mindfulness. A design principle you hear often in photography is the rule of thirds. The rule of thirds is a theory dictating how an image should be composed in order to create an aesthetically pleasing result. Think of your image as being split into 9 equal parts as pictured here. You want to align points of interest, in this case the lighthouse, in the intersections or along the lines. Notice how the lighthouse is positioned on the right side where the lines meet in the grid. In all honesty, it's more of a guideline than an actual rule, but generally creates good results. Plus, you need to know the rules before you break the rules. Negative space, or white space, is empty space between and around elements of a design or page layout. It helps draw attention to and accentuates the content of the design. Basically, the principle is give your elements room to breathe. Our next principle is legibility and readability. Readability is about arranging words and groups of words in a way that allows the reader's eyes to access the content easily. Legibility is a component of readability. It is defined as how easy it is to distinguish one letter from another in a particular typeface. In the examples here, Helvetica, as a clean and simple font with good spacing, is more legible and readable, while Escafina is very stylized and therefore not as readable or legible, especially at smaller sizes. The next principle is repetition. Repeating visual elements such as lines, colors, shapes, textures, or images tend to unify the total effect of a work of art as well as create rhythm. Repetition can take the form of an exact duplication pattern, a near duplication, or duplication with variety. In this example, the magazine uses a repetitive style for each road stop point. It creates a consistent style. Another principle is unity and harmony. According to Alex White, author of The Elements of Graphic Design, achieving visual unity is a main goal of graphic design. When all elements are in agreement, a design is considered unified and harmonious. No individual part is viewed as more important than the whole design. There's not one way to achieve unity and harmony. It can be established by creating a visual focal point of alignment. It can also be achieved by using similar images or elements that all fit into the theme or style of the design. Another common method is using repetition. Notice how the designs pictured here both create unity and harmony in different ways. The one on the left and in the middle use repetition and repeating elements of feet dancing. In this case, the two designs are brought together visually through repetition. On the other hand, the example on the right uses a continuation of drawings along a diagonal focal point that ties it all together to create unity and harmony. The Getty describes balance as the distribution of the visual weight of objects, color, textures, and space. There are three common types of balance: symmetry, asymmetry, and radial. Here are movie poster examples of the three different types. In the Fight Club poster on the left, symmetrical balance is created by putting the two characters opposite of each other. They have similar weight. The color contrast also creates a balance of light and dark. In the King's Speech poster, asymmetrical balance is created with the character on one side and the microphone on the other side. They are different sizes, but it still looks balanced. Finally, in the Shining movie poster, we have radial balance. This is when the elements are arranged around a central point and may be similar. In this example, the designer created a maze that wraps around the central point, the title, The Shining. Emphasis is the part of the design that catches the viewer's attention. Usually the artist will make one area stand out by contrasting it with other areas. The area could be different in size, color, texture, shape, etc. Just as with balance, there are many ways to create emphasis. These examples show three different ways. The Graduate movie poster uses negative space and sizing to draw your attention to the title. The Exorcist poster uses color and contrast to draw emphasis on the character. Lastly, the Good, the Bad, and the Ugly poster uses texture to draw your attention to the character picture. Our last principle is alignment. In addition to providing order and structure, aligning elements connects them with each other. Without alignment, your design could look cluttered and messy. However, asymmetrical design, such as the one on the right, can be bold and create an interesting composition if done well. You should now be able to identify the elements and principles of design and talk about color and typography. Congratulations, you finished Module 1, Industry Knowledge and Fundamentals of Design. Continue on to Module 2, Understanding and Navigating Adobe Photoshop, where we'll open the software up and show you around the interface.